A young priestess enters the Adventurers Guild and is assigned the lowest rank, known as Porcelain. She's approached by a group of novice adventurers, all at the same rank, desperately seeking a healer for their upcoming adventure. They request her assistance in clearing the nearby cave infested with goblins, creatures typically seen as low-level challenges. However, their expectations shatter as they realize the goblins are far more cunning and formidable than anticipated. Trapped in a narrow passage, the goblins outsmart them with cunning tricks and overpowering force. The wizard gets overwhelmed, the warrior's long sword becomes impractical in the confined space, and the fighter falls without support. Fleeing the chaos, the priestess manages to escape with her wounded comrade. Pursued by a couple of goblins, she grapples with the choice of defending her friend or prioritizing her own safety. Just as things seem dire, a fully armored adventurer wielding a short sword and shield, known as Goblin Slayer, who rescues her from imminent danger. Acknowledging the severity of the situation, Goblin Slayer swiftly takes charge. Realizing the injured comrade's fate is sealed, the focus shifts to eliminating the goblins. Understanding the wisdom and staying by Goblin Slayer's side, the priestess resolves to assist him, eager to learn and be of use. Together, they delve deeper into the cave and stumble upon a small room occupied by a goblin shaman. Utilizing one of her miraculous abilities, the priestess blinds the shaman, enabling Goblin Slayer to take decisive action. They eliminate the remaining goblins infesting the nest, and then make their way back to the guild. The next time Goblin Slayer takes on a quest, Priestess enters the guild, clad in the chainmail he recommended. Ready for goblin slaying, she's determined to prove her mettle. Meanwhile, Goblin Slayer follows his morning routine, checking the farm's perimeter where he resides. Later, he accompanies his childhood friend, Cowgirl. They go into town for her deliveries, and then heading to the Adventurers Guild for work. At the guild, whispers circulate among adventurers, making jokes about Goblin Slayer's supper armor and his preference for goblin quests despite his silver rank. The guild girl, responsible for quests and rewards, values his commitment to tasks others avoid. Priestess arrives, surprising onlookers, and Goblin Slayer tests her goblin slaying knowledge. Approaching the counter, they inquire about goblin-related quests. Finding one involving the goblin settlement in an old fortress, Goblin Slayer opts for the challenge. Priestess suggests aiding an inexperienced party with another goblin job, fearing their demise, but Goblin Slayer rejects the idea. Undeterred, she joins him. Goblin Slayer reveals his fixation on goblin extermination, rooted in childhood trauma. Goblins raided his village, resulting in his sister's death, while he watched helplessly. Cowgirl's parents also perished during the attack, leading them to reside on her uncle's farm. Traumatized, Goblin Slayer became obsessed with eradicating goblins. Cowgirl's uncle warns her of Goblin Slayer's intense fixation. Later, Goblin Slayer and Priestess assault the goblin fortress, setting it ablaze. Using her newfound miracle, Priestess blocks exits, preventing goblins from escaping their fiery demise. Though committed to goblin eradication, she questions the necessity of such brutality. In a distant city, a bard's melodic tunes echo through the air, narrating the legendary feats of Goblin Slayer. The mesmerizing tale captures the attention of passing adventurers, prompting inquiries about the hero's whereabouts. A high elf archer, a dwarf shaman, and a lizard man priest find their way to the Adventurers Guild, seeking someone known as Orkbulk, a name lost in translation referring to Goblin Slayer. Sorting through the misunderstanding, the trio finally realizes they're in search of Goblin Slayer. Just as the confusion settles, Goblin Slayer and Priestess enter the guild hall. The trio eagerly implores Goblin Slayer to hear their mission. However, he instructs Priestess to wait downstairs while he deliberates. Downstairs, a witch, claiming to be an acquaintance of Goblin Slayer, joins Priestess. Understanding the priest's decision, Witch warns Priestess to be cautious yet asserts her independence. Upstairs, the trio explains their mission to combat the resurrected Demon Lord and his army. Goblin Slayer, however, bluntly dismisses their cause if it doesn't involve goblins. Fortunately, with goblin activity on the rise, they secure Goblin Slayer's acceptance of the job. Back downstairs, Priestess, curious about the mission, is met with Goblin Slayer's typical social ineptitude. Annoyed, he advises her not to come, leading to a confrontation. Undeterred, Priestess decides to accompany him that night. The group of 5 sets up camp, sharing stories about their motivations for becoming adventurers. Goblin Slayer regales them with his sister's tale, claiming goblins originated from the Green Moon. As they reach the goblin nest and deal with guards, Goblin Slayer covers himself in goblin blood, instructing others to do the same to mask their scent. Navigating the underground structure, they come to a fork where the dwarf notes a hideout is to the left. However, Goblin Slayer leads them right to rescuing an elven prisoner. Vowing to avenge her, they backtrack and proceed down the left corridor. Entering the large circular hall with sleeping goblins, they cast sleeping spells to exterminate the creatures quietly. Suddenly, heavy footsteps announce the arrival of an ogre. Realizing it's not a goblin, Goblin Slayer loses interest, infuriating the already bloodthirsty ogre. Priestess acts quickly, casting protection to counter the ogre's fireball, saving the entire party. Despite their efforts, the ogre proves a formidable foe. Priestess assists Goblin Slayer, enabling him to unleash a scroll that subverts the ogre's limbs, flooding the area with seawater. The gate scroll used was linked to the bottom of the ocean, unleashing water under immense pressure. Reinforcements arrive, and the group heads back to town. The archer expresses dissatisfaction, claiming adventuring should be fun, and this was anything but. She articulates her desire to one day lead them on a proper and enjoyable adventure. A few days later, Goblin Slayer and Cowgirl venture into town to sell her uncle's produce. The elf, dwarf, and lizard man run into him, proposing the idea of exploring more ruins. Goblin Slayer, surprising them, says he'll consider it. Meanwhile, 2 rookie adventurers search for a new weapon after losing their only sword in the sewers. In the guild hall, they receive a special candle that burns hotter the closer they get to what they seek. Goblin Slayer visits the blacksmith to drop off gear for repairs, and looks for a new scroll to replace the one used against the ogre. The blacksmith promises to keep an eye out but doubts finding one soon. In the guild, the rookies, lacking money, seek advice from Guild Girl. Goblin Slayer advises them to obtain a club until they recover their sword. Before leaving, Guild Girl asks a favor, to sit in as an observer during a promotion exam, as she's short-staffed. During the exam, she questions a scout for being too well-equipped for his experience. The scout tries to explain, but the other examiner exposes him as a low-down dirty thief. Frustrated, he attempts to gain Goblin Slayer's support, but to no avail. Fearful of Orc Bulk's wrath, he accepts the consequences. Elsewhere, the 2 rookies armed with a club and a special candle fight through giant insects in the sewers. They retrieve their lost sword from the belly of an insect that ate the rat carrying it. The sewers challenges unfold as they press on, determined to overcome obstacles in their quest for recovery and growth. The other examiner playfully teases Guild Girl about her crush on Goblin Slayer. Suddenly, an urgent request reaches the office specifically for Goblin Slayer's services from Swordman, a former adventurer turned hero after defeating the Demon Lord a decade ago. Announcing his journey to Watertown, Goblin Slayer invites others to join. The group criticizes his lack of interpersonal skills and decision-making, imposing conditions to reduce extreme brutality, and ban fire, water torture, or poison. Arriving at Watertown, they head to the Temple of Law, where Priestess wonders about the summoner. Goblin Slayer casually reveals the Archbishop of the Supreme God, Sword Maiden, as their employer. Meeting her, he immediately declares, "I'm here for the goblins," shocking Priestess with his poor manners. Despite her mortification, Priestess attempts a more formal introduction. Bodies showing signs of violence have been found in the streets, leading the guards to thwart a goblin assault. Sword Maiden believes the goblins have established themselves in the extensive sewer system beneath the city. Providing a map, she sends the party to investigate. In the sewers, they encounter multiple groups of goblins. While crossing a bridge, they face a sudden attack by a boatload of goblins. The dwarf uses magic to sink the boat with a large boulder. Surprises continue when a giant alligator appears in the water. Priestess uses a miracle, causing its tail to glow and attracting the goblin fleet. They watch as the alligator takes care of the goblins, with Goblin Slayer deducing that someone must have taught the goblins to use boats intentionally. Returning to town, Priestess enjoys a hot bath and is joined by Sword Maiden. The seasoned adventurer advises Priestess not to rely completely on her new mentor, hinting at the challenges that lie ahead. Meanwhile, Goblin Slayer checks the job board, puzzled by the absence of requests involving giant rats, common in sewer systems. To detect poison gas in old traps, he decides to purchase a canary before descending into the ruins below the city. Navigating beyond their maps, the party encounters a large door. The archer finds it unlocked and trap-free, prompting them to investigate. Upon entering, they realize it's a trap as the door slams shut, releasing poisonous gas. Sealing vents, they prepare for an ambush. Goblins flood through the only door, and Goblin Slayer, unable to resist, leaves the protection of Priestess's barrier to engage them. Led by a giant goblin champion, the goblins overwhelm the group. As the situation mirrors a tragic past event, Priestess loses focus and the protective barrier disappears. The goblin champion targets her, inflicting a severe injury. Just as the situation seems dire, Goblin Slayer, fueled by rage and memories of his sister, rises using a decoy's hair as a garrote to choke the giant goblin and ripping its eye out. The display terrifies the remaining goblins, forcing them to flee. Goblin Slayer checks on Priestess, and after a brief exchange, succumbs to his wounds. In a flashback, a young Goblin Slayer faces riddles from his master, a goblin-like creature, with the threat of giant icicles looming overhead. As an adult Goblin Slayer wakes up in Sword Maiden's bed beside Priestess, it becomes evident that resurrection miracles require sleeping next to a virgin for their healing properties. The rest of the party is relieved to see him awake, and they share a meal. Later, Goblin Slayer and Priestess head into town for errands and gear repairs. While the others explore the sewers, they stumble upon the marvel of ice cream. Later, spearmen from their hometown Adventurers Guild deliver a package for Goblin Slayer. In the sewers, they unveil their latest discovery, a giant floating eye monster guarding a room. Its formidable casting abilities make direct confrontation undesirable, but Goblin Slayer's package is ideal for the task. Creating an opening, Goblin Slayer fills the room with a cloud of finely ground flour, igniting it to dispatch the creature efficiently. Amidst the aftermath, they find a strange mirror, the only valuable item in the otherwise empty space. When Priestess touches the mirror, the reflection shifts, revealing goblins working with tools in another location, likely the source of the goblin influx. The explosion alerts more goblins in the ruins, prompting the party to set up defenses. The lizard man works on removing the mirror while the others engage swarms of goblins. Goblin Slayer directs the lizard man to orient the mirror toward the ceiling, protecting the group as debris passes through to the other side of the portal, likely causing havoc among more goblins. Returning to the Temple of Law, Goblin Slayer confronts Sword Maiden, accusing her of withholding information. The bodies found in the streets weren't goblins, but someone staged them to raise concerns. Sword Maiden reveals Alligator is her familiar, and explains that the mirror was left by a cult. Delaying action was her way of proving Goblin's destructive nature, driven by her own trauma. Offering him the mirror, she learns it's encased in concrete and sunk to the lake bottom. Despite empathizing with her suffering, Goblin Slayer cannot provide the salvation she seeks. However, he assures her that if goblins are involved in the future, he'll be there to help. With their tasks in Watertown complete, the party makes their way back. Goblin Slayer plans to unravel the mystery of ice cream, reminding about his sister, cooking his favorite meal the night she died. However, he is disheartened that it's been so long that he can't even remember what it tastes like. After breakfast on the farm, he accompanies Cowgirl into town to get his armor repaired at the guild. Without his gear on, Spearman doesn't recognize him and chats with him like he's new in town, much to Guild Girl and Witch's amusement, who may or may not have some idea of his true identity. After dropping off his damaged armor and retrieving his spare identical suit, he runs into Priestess at the guild. Guild Girl also approaches him with the letter that arrived from Watertown. The rest of the party shows up, and they insist that they all go out for lunch, extending the invite to Guild Girl and Cowgirl, who popped in just in time to be included. While they eat, Guild Girl substantiates the rumors of the hero defeating the Demon Lord, and many cities are holding celebrations. although there aren't any large celebrations in their town as the harvest festival is coming up. She goes on to detail a new program for retired adventurers to train rookies. The girls encourage Goblin Slayer to be a little less reckless so he'll have a chance at making it to retirement. On their way home, Pablo remarks on how nice his new friends are, though he's still pretty oblivious. Back on the farm, Cowgirl finds Goblin Slayer wondering about his future, which is encouraging, but she wonders whether he'll ever choose to stop doing what he does or what he would do if he did. The following morning, Goblin Slayer makes his rounds only to discover a concerning number of little footprints at the perimeter, vindicating his paranoia. But this is one of those situations where it sucks to be right. He tells Cowgirl to run, figuring the horde numbers over 100 and will likely attack soon. Real soon, like in 10 nights. However, he's not running, so she refuses to leave, despite the fact that he's admitted he's no match for 100 goblins out in the open place. Goblin Slayer urgently heads to the guild, seeking help from his fellow members. Despite goblins being treated as a mere joke, he insists there must be a goblin lord leading such a large raiding party. Spearman lectures him on the pragmatism of adventuring, emphasizing the lack of charity without a reward, particularly considering Goblin Slayer's usual demeanor and attitude. Guild Girl overhears the plea, moved by this rare request from a man who never seeks assistance. Responding to Spearman, Goblin Slayer offers anything and everything he owns, even the clothes off his back, underscoring the severity of the situation. Spearman, recognizing the desperation, agrees to help for a good, strong drink. The rest of Goblin Slayer's party, along with which, decides to join the cause. Guild Girl returns, announcing a 1 gold coin reward per goblin head, which sparks increased interest among adventurers to join the fight. In preparation, Goblin Slayer impressively devises a strategic plan, dispelling doubts about his silver rank. The raid begins, and the adventurers meticulously follow Goblin Slayer's instructions. The first step involves rescuing captives used as human shields, successfully dismantling the initial goblin wave. The subsequent wave, comprised of goblins riding on the backs of wolves as predicted by Goblin Slayer, faces the defenders' spear wall that exploits their vertical mobility advantage. Undeterred, the Goblin Lord sends in hobgoblins and goblin champions. He's under no illusions about how things are going and runs back toward his nest. However, Goblin Slayer, who knows the goblin mind too well, intercepts him. With his eye glowing red, Goblin Slayer taunts the Goblin Lord, revealing that the defenders at the farm were a distraction while he cleared out the nest. The Goblin Lord, cornered, faces its inevitable demise. On the farm, adventurers continue to battle the dwindling goblin forces. Even seasoned fighters are surprised by the giant variance, a consequence of their general dismissiveness and ignorance regarding goblins. Meanwhile, Goblin Slayer confronts the Goblin Lord and endures its attacks. The Goblin Lord, thinking victory is secure, witnesses its downfall as Priestess emerges from the trees. Priestess casts a miracle of protection twice, creating barriers that effectively trap the confused goblin. Desperate for sympathy, the Goblin Lord finds none in Goblin Slayer, who, true to his name, shows no mercy. The hero and her companions return after defeating the Demon Lord, puzzled by the empty town despite celebrations. Back at the guild, adventurers toast to victory after a long night of goblin slaying. Priestess, exhausted, nods off against Goblin Slayer, who discreetly slips the 1 gold coin reward for killing the Goblin Lord into her hand. Later, when she wakes up, she sees the gold coin and learns she earned it. Curious, she asks why he didn't post his plea as a job initially. Haunted by his past and the raid that killed his sister, Goblin Slayer confesses he feared no one would respond, as everyone ignored that tragedy. Even after the gold coin, Priestess wonders if he would remove his helmet. He complies, and the guild is in disbelief, finally seeing his face for the first time, leaving many on the wrong side of their bets about what lay beneath the ever-present metal grate that obscures his features. Thank you for sticking until the end. Subscribe for more videos like this.